Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this month's West Valley is Open for Business webinar series. We're really excited that we have kind of a new type of discussion that we're going to have today, where it really gets you behind the scenes. We've been talking a lot about the projects that are coming out of the ground, but now we're going to take a look at behind that curtain and see what that looks like, some of the great tools that we have available that are attracting business to the West Valley and making it a great place to live, work, and play. I believe in transportation investments, and we've definitely seen a lot of great growth going on along the Loop 303. So that's what we'll be talking about today. The Greater Maricopa Foreign Trade Zone Board is with us today, as well as consultant Curtis Spencer. Excuse me, Curtis. My goodness, too many Curtises in my life. Who will be joining us this morning. So with that, I will turn it over to Mike Hoover, and Mike will do a better job moderating and getting through these names than I just did. There you go, Mike.
Thank you, Centra, and good afternoon, everyone. This is a bit of a treat for me. We get to talk about a program that started only a decade ago, and the growth that the West Valley saw in the 2000s really necessitated for the economic development practitioners in the West Valley to have better tools to bring inward investment to the West Valley, to bring more jobs to the West Valley. And this was a true public-private collaboration 10 years ago that is celebrating a lot of its success and really geared for more success. And before I introduce our first speaker, I do want to acknowledge Diane McCarthy, who's here today. She's the chair of the GMFTZ, and we have a blue ribbon panel, but Diane, you are definitely the rose between a bunch of thorns, so I'm hoping we can have a wonderful time today. So I want to start with just a little overview of what we're going to be looking at. First, we're going to get some of the basics of a foreign trade zone, really kind of what that tool is, what it means in Arizona, the genesis of the zone in the West Valley. And then we're going to talk to some great professionals in the West Valley that are really elevating the property profile in the West Valley for this tool. So without further ado, I'm very glad to introduce someone that's been a part of the zone really since the beginning, which is Curtis Spencer. Curtis?
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. And everybody, we're very excited to join with Westmark and put together this program. It's going to take the full hour. We got plenty of time for questions at the end, so please be ready to ask any kind of questions, and Mike will tee those up for us. So what's our agenda today? We're going to talk about what is a foreign trade zone, turning it over after that to Diane McCarthy and Harry Paxton, the chair and vice chair of the zone, and the who, what, where, and why. Then we're going to let Harry then start out with some case studies, and then turn it over to the three broker professionals that we have on board here that can really talk to you about what does a customer see when they were looking for a site in the West Valley, and why the foreign trade zone has meant so much. And then, as I said earlier, we'll have a good Q&A piece. So the foreign trade zone program is a federal program. It started right after the Great Depression, 1934. It's available in all 50 states, and 2 states have tied the foreign trade zone program to state and local incentives, extra incentives. Texas eliminates what they call the inventory tax, a huge savings in Texas, which is why, as a state, there are more foreign trade zones in Texas than any other state. And then Arizona had a special legislation passed for attracting Intel. The first time Intel came to Chandler, the legislature put together a program and said, hey, we'll tie an incentive to the federal program foreign trade zone and give some property reclass availability. So that's really what a foreign trade zone is. It is a management tool all about all about customs tariffs. So if you've got a tariff on your product, and in the last 4 years, we've seen those tariffs rise from an average of 2% to now an average of 25%, is the inbound tariff from most Far Eastern countries where the production is. So for this shirt, for example, or the panels on the wall behind me are imported. When they're imported, they cost $10, but I have to add another $2.50 for a $2 for a 25% tariff. It raises the cost. So how do I mitigate that cost? I mitigate it with a foreign trade zone. And I'm about to show you how and why. But the last bullet on this slide is very, very important. Anyone, any business who qualifies can get the foreign trade zone. Okay. All right. So FTZs are used by manufacturers, auto, solar, oil, appliance, R&D, pharma. We have a can manufacturer. We have a refrigerator manufacturer. We have got a door and gate manufacturer. We've got a high-tech Tesla subcontract manufacturer, all in the foreign trade zone here in the West Valley. Importers, it's huge for importers because not only do they save on the tariff, they also save on a customs fee that's now been rising over the last 5 years. It's up to $500 per entry. Third-party logistics providers use the foreign trade zone. We have 2 here in the West Valley, XPO that's about to get started, and UPS has been in the zone now for about three years. And a third one is getting started up here very shortly. Developers, as a benefit to their customers, they realize the benefit, and you're going to hear a lot more about that from our real estate broker professionals. And then, of course, as Mike was saying, the economic development community really grabbed a hold of this and said, hey, this is a great tool for us. This tool is one of the best tools we have in the whole state of Arizona. So they're taking advantage of it as well. So what does it actually do? Well, it speeds up the supply chain. And if you've carried anything about what's gone on with COVID, with the rise of e-commerce now up to 15% of all retail sales, just announced yesterday in the Wall Street. Supply chain and the speed of the supply chain is absolutely humongous. It makes a difference in the locational decision is how fast I can get my products in and how fast I can get my products out. So an FTZ actually speeds it up. A study that was done by Black & Decker and Skechers several years ago, and I got to be a part of that study, indicated that in an inland area, not at a port, so Phoenix, Greater Maricopa foreign trade zone, this is an inland area, we get 2 days increase in the supply chain speed. On a coast, you get 1 day. So it's very, very important to have that speed to market. FTZs basically lower your importing costs, which can be either a purchase price variance if you're a manufacturer, or is just lower cost of goods sold. And FTZ security is better than any. It's a tier 3 CT-PAT qualifier now, which means if you're an importer, you want to be tier 3, you get it with FTZ. And FTZs create jobs. And we're going to hear a lot about that from Diane and Harry coming up in just a short while. So in the big picture, why is there so much emphasis on FTZs now? I have to tell you, since the current administration has been in power and the tariffs on China were raised to 25%, and the steel and aluminum tariffs for everybody, including our neighbors, Canada and Mexico, were raised from about 6% to 20%, 25%, and 10% for aluminum. Our business in foreign trade zones has grown dramatically. And we do foreign trade zones all across the country. We're on our 389th foreign trade zone project in the 40 years that we've been around. So we've seen a huge shift because economics, FTZs pay for themselves, is a huge deal. The FTZ status gives a big boost to your federal and your local incentive. Companies are using it much more because of the tariffs. Qualifying is the issue. You got to meet the federal regulations, but they're not too strict. And the importing community has really embraced FTZs. You know, you got everybody from the largest phone maker on the planet to Target, to Walmart. Everybody, large importing customers are using the foreign trade zone. So last slide before I turn it over to our chair is that in Arizona, what we have is the incentive is that the greenfield sites that are new, where their current tax rate is like 0.0001% because it's got an agriculture exemption on it. Some of the ones that Lance Ross is going to talk to about were rose fields full of roses last year, and this year they're home to one of the largest brewing companies in North America. So existing sites with the development only get 5% on new construction or on value added, which is the case that we had here with Sub-Zero. They bought a building that already existed. So the whole key then is we protect all current tax entity revenues. In this foreign trade zone, nobody can set up a zone and have taxes reduced, only have taxes increase. And the increase has been very well qualified and quantified by Harry Paxton, and he'll show you in his slides. It is a status, the FTZ status is allowed for all kinds of importing companies that qualify. And once they qualify, the state law is approved and activated, means I get to have my foreign trade zone benefits, federal, and I get to reclass the property to class 6, which is the 5% valuation instead of 18% valuation. All right, let's look for Miss Diane McCarthy to take over and give us a little bit of indication of where, who, what, why, and how is this foreign trade zone put together.
Well, thank you, Curtis. I think first of all, everybody, I hope, is taking a look at the map. That's a pretty big piece of land when you take a look at the cities in the West Valley who all right now are together. There aren't big gaps between Avondale and Goodyear. There's one street there between the two of them.
That's true.
And take a look at Phoenix over here, how tiny Phoenix is compared to what we have as far as the West Valley is concerned. Take a look at the next page, if we could. GMFTZ is an organization, nonprofit, and volunteers. We have a board of directors. We have a couple of very prominent West Valley executives in Joe LaRue and Steve Betts. Westmark is our administrative staff, plus marketing and promotional support. And IMS, Operating Services, Inc., provides professional foreign trade zone technical guidance to the grantee and board that administers and manages the zone project. So we have two contractors. We have Westmark for support, and we have IMS for all of the technical programs. Goals and objectives. Easy goals and objectives, jobs and investment. Economic impact for all. You have state, cities, schools, Westmec, industry, and citizens. It's not just for business, but it's for all of the stakeholders. And as another little tidbit, I happened to have breakfast this morning with the head of Westmec, and they are looking to help out as well, get the students involved in a lot of these programs or these projects now. And the key policy of the zone is to embrace and protect each city's taxing entities. And each of them keeps very careful with all of that and keeps it close to their vest. And with that, let's show the video.
All right. This is a great video of GMFTZ and how it got put together.
Sounds like
Well, I see it, but I don't hear it.
Yeah, Curtis, I don't know if you want to speak to some of the variances or if you're going to do that after. I don't know if you want to mention it while this is playing.
Yeah, so there's currently 8 companies that are using it and 3 acute companies. This was a video done back in 2019. And what we're going to show you in a minute, this is all the manufacturing that are done. We expected 1,600 jobs. We ended up with lots more jobs, and Harry will talk about that. We looked at the investment totals that are coming up, and they were close to $1 billion was projected. Elliott Pollock did the original study that this was made from. And let's see, can you get me back to the deck here? There you go. All right, so the regional impact, we took some time over the last month and did an internal update review. And Harry, if you can kind of walk us through this, in just 18 months, there's been a significant upgrade in those projections.
Yeah, thank you, Curtis. That was a very good point about that video. It gives you an idea of how fast things are changing here in the West Valley. If I remember right, that video was probably done early 2019. So here we are coming up on the end of 2020, and this is a conservative impact, but it certainly account for all of these different jobs, over 3,600 direct jobs. 15 companies actively using or about to use the FTZ and GMFTZ in the West Valley here. Nearly $2.1 billion in capital investments, double the projection we had just a couple years ago. So that is significant, and we'll show you in just a minute how that really translates to tremendous benefits for communities, for schools. One of the things that's very important that we want to continue to tout is that these are attracting quality companies that pay quality wages. 10 of the 15 companies are high wage employers. 9 of those 15 companies are manufacturing companies that tend to have higher wages and that tend to have more employees per square foot in their building.
Harry, can you put that in a perspective compared to the prevailing wage amount and what these companies are doing? Not you don't give away the company specifics, but where are we talking? Are we talking better wages than the 42,000 plus that is the prevailing wage?
Yeah, so one of the measures that we use in Arizona to qualify for the statutory programs in Arizona is what we call 125% of the state median wage. That's almost about 44,000 right now, and it varies depending on changes a little bit each year. But so each of these companies, the majority of their employees are paid that or higher. In fact, I've got one company in my community I know that pays double that, and some of the other communities as well. So, we have some great high wage employers here in great capital investment that's being brought to the communities. So let me give you some examples of that. You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah.
So this slide here, you can see, I'm going to take you back in time a little bit. So in 2014, over there to your left, you can see an aerial here of the Loop 303 corridor just north of the I-10 and Loop 303 connection, where it's commonly known today as the PV 303 area. But it's more than just the Palm Valley Business Park. It's also other developments in that area. Back in 2014, we had 2 major companies there. Sub-Zero, which was the first company in the greater Maricopa Foreign Trade Zone, and Dick's Sporting Goods had recently opened up, I think about a year earlier than this aerial shows. So 2 major companies. At that time, most of this land, as you can see, was pretty vacant, and that also means a lot of the infrastructure is not there. For example, when Dick's Sporting Goods came in, they had to bring regional water line all the way on the other side of Loop 303 for about a couple miles in order to serve that area. So a lot of infrastructures had to go in. What I want to show is how this is a catalyst for other development to come, and each of those projects have brought us more infrastructure. And now you can look just 5, 6 years later in 2020, 17 different companies. 5 of those are FTZ companies, but because those FTZ companies came there, located there, brought major infrastructure, brought major investment and notoriety to the area, it's helped us to bring more investment. It's a very active area. 2 of those companies I can't even announce today, but they're underway. They're down there in the blue. And this is, I think, a really good example of how a foreign trade zone, in this case, a specific magnet site, was a catalyst for more development in an area, which is a range. You can tell there are many users there. In fact, there's only 5 of those users that are FTZ today. Many users that won't be, so it's brought a lot of investment and helped bring investment and notoriety to the area as it's brought infrastructure of companies that don't necessarily qualify for foreign trade zone, but also bring tremendous amounts of jobs and investment to the community. You want to go to the next slide?
Yeah, so your point there was that you have both companies that use the foreign trade zone attracted to the area, as well as companies that don't use the foreign trade zone. So
Right.
It's the best of both worlds.
Exactly. When we started our foreign trade zone program in Goodyear, along with GMFTZ, we wanted it to be a catalyst to bring great companies, but also we knew the companies that don't need a foreign trade zone, it could also bring a catalyst for other development. And that's a great example right there. I also wanted to show you drill down on a couple of companies. One in that zone there, Ball Corporation, and the benefits that brought to our community. At the time that they located in our community, they thought they'd be 120 jobs or so, 130 jobs. Now they're well over 200 jobs. And what's really significant here, if you look at that 5-year estimate in terms of property taxes or in terms of taxes generated to 3 of those taxing jurisdictions, the city, as well as their 2 major school districts in that area, you can see if it's undeveloped and it remained undeveloped in the first line there with no new investment, which it was just a vacant parcel of 29 acres. The taxes collected was very small. Ball Corporation came in, and if they activated the FTZ, which we assumed that they would, and we assumed from day one, so we were very conservative here, and they got the FTZ benefit, you can see the benefit to the school districts and the city, as well as other taxing jurisdictions we don't have on here, the major difference. Now this property was just vacant property. It wasn't farmed, so it generated some taxes, but not a lot. But certainly, even with that FTZ benefit, significant amount of increase in taxes to the taxing jurisdictions. But because that benefit's available, it becomes a catalyst to attract high quality companies, have high capital investment. In this case, they invested $270 million to date, and they hadn't turned on they're just beginning to turn on that foreign trade zone. So that actual impact number would be significantly higher today if we did the actual numbers. Let's go to the next one. So in another part of our community, go to the next slide. Another part of our community, we're fortunate to attract another manufacturer, Andersen Windows. You may have heard of Andersen Windows. This development here is just the first phase of what will be eventually a 1 million square foot project. Their first phase will be about 415 jobs, or ramping up to about 100 beginning this next year. This is a 546,000 square foot facility, and because it'll eventually grow to 1 million square feet, they purchased 68 acres. Now think of that. There's 68 acres on this development. Before that, it was undeveloped, and what it was generating over a 5-year period of time was about only $4,000 to those taxing jurisdictions over a 5-year period. 68 acres. Go back to the previous slide, Curtis. Now remember, this project here was on about 29 acres, and it generated a lot more property taxes, even though there wasn't anything developed. And why would that be? Good question to ask. Go back to the next slide, Curtis.
Sure.
So they only generated $4,000, and the reason why is because it was agriculturally exempted.
Right.
There's hardly any, and Curtis was making that point earlier. So there's significant property tax growth for those properties that don't have any development on them, and especially those properties that are agriculturally exempted. So even with an FTZ, you can see the benefit that that brings in the taxing jurisdictions. One of the reasons why we wanted to provide that, ultimately to provide the program, but ultimately obviously to create the jobs, but it also has a very positive impact on your tax base. There are thousands of acres throughout the West Valley of property that is farmed that will eventually be, hopefully, great projects like this that can generate a significant more of property taxes. Want to go to the next slide?
Yeah. Let's switch real quick over to Glendale's FTZ growth and impact, and I'm gonna pull in Lance Ross, who's done quite a bit of broker work there, and a long time ago, Lance, it was what, 12 years ago, you and I got together and started putting together the master plan for the Wolf Logistics Center and worked on getting the rail there, and it was a long time in coming for the rail, but now it looks like it's doing really, really good. So if you want to take over from here and walk through this slide and the next one, I think it'll be great for everybody to hear what the impact has been in Glendale. Now we got to get you unmuted.
Am I unmuted now?
There you go.
Okay, good. I'm going to start with just a little background in terms of what the occupiers that we have been successful in attracting into Glendale and to Wolf, as well as those that are coming into the entire FTZ area in Arizona today. What's really recognizable is business exists to make a profit. And when the business is successful, the benefit it creates to the entire community. Right. And if you believe that, you believe in FTZ, you believe in economic development and growth. Therefore, communities, in addition to all the other tasks that they do, really have to commit to a best-in-class destination. And this means building a competitive community that goes simply beyond the live-work environment. And the West Valley is uniquely positioned today because of its unencumbered old infrastructure. In other words, all of these projects are built new, fresh, virgin ground, if you will. New growth markets afford a community to really create a typology for development that's taking place. And when we focus on business in the community, I want to recognize the value of existing businesses because oftentimes they're overlooked. But most existing businesses are either growing, they're stabilized, or they're reducing. And those that are growing are looking for the same kinds of things within our community as those that are coming into the community. And so it's important to not be bound by the barriers and create barriers within the community for your businesses to grow. So in other words, as businesses move, they move where the price is right. And everything's included in price today. Every business has a set of expectations. They have their goals, they have their objectives when they consider relocating or expanding. And many of the economic development folks that are probably on this Zoom recognize those, but I'd like to point out 10 that I think are critically important. One is development-ready sites. This offers lower risk when businesses come to the market. It eliminates time delays. It gives access to due diligence information. And believe it or not, all communities are not created equal when it comes to timeframes, cost, and process. And when I look at the West Valley and Westmark, it is a community amongst itself. I mean, they've come together and the way they're working. First, we bring business to Arizona. Then we're working to bring it into our individual developments, but we're all working together. Access to utilities, both wet and dry, both the available needs today and the available needs in the future. Because
Right.
businesses aren't looking to just move here and run their operations for today. They're looking to expand in the future. Cost of those operations, including utilities, transportations, salaries, workman's comp, licenses, taxes, both at the state and at the local level, all critically important to business today. Transportation infrastructure, what currently exists, what's going to be built, and how is it going to be paid for? Diversity, communities today, all genders, ethnic, income. Are you inclusive or are you exclusive? And the reason I bring that up is years ago, the real estate departments of large corporations ran the real estate decisions. Today, they're being done by the logistics departments and HR.
Exactly.
And so when we drive or tour folks, we'll have more logistics folks and HR people in the bus than we will real estate people today. Affordable housing, always critical. I mean, and that's something that, you just have to continue to look at. A stable and skilled workforce, including what was brought up earlier, apprenticeships, internships, and the professional development opportunities, which are typically tied to educational infrastructure that a community has or in the proximity. Strong political leadership. And what I mean by that is, how do you get to yes rather than how do you get to no? Most businesses are looking for communities that figure out how to accomplish things and move forward and get to yes. The establishment of intellectual, stimulating, creative environments, socially, culturally, and your amenities. Big to business today. Why? It's because businesses are looking to build and protect their brands and their values, but they also, their ambitions. So they're looking at the what's next with their business and the community and their surrounding. And critically important that they look at and ask, why not all, but tax credits, FTZs, and other incentives. FTZs come in more and more and will continue to come in as manufacturing companies reshore, and as the e-commerce and logistics companies provide not only the work that they do to move product around, but also assemblage and things that are almost diversifying those logistics companies as they currently exist. All these things and considerations are important to communities, and we're just happy to be involved in the West Side. We've been out there for 15 years. It's an overnight, wonder what we've done. But currently today, and at the Wolf Logistics Center, there's 3 million square feet under construction, and I would tell you there's probably 6 other businesses that'll locate there within the next 6 months.
Here's a picture of it I put up for you, Lance, that everybody can see, and you can kind of show them how many more projects are working. I couldn't believe it went so fast. Once it started going, just started going fast.
Right. This is our first section, the first project we opened up. It's about 580 acres, and currently there are either offers or purchase and sale agreements for every site on that particular area today. Now, that's a rail serve site from the BNSF. That spur coming kind of north and branching off, the rail will serve Ball Container. It'll serve Roush, which is Red Bull, Ball, and Roush.
And Mark Anthony.
Yeah, and then you have Mark Anthony to the south, which is your White Claw. And in between the Roush and the Mark Anthony, you have a Red Bull distribution center. That's 750,000 feet under construction with expansion.
Yeah, notice everybody, the blank squares at the end of most of those buildings, those are expansion areas where they've already got planned expansion for the products that are going to be made there. A little tidbit in the import world, the Port of Houston imports 45,000 containers of Red Bull every year. Starting next year, Lance, and correct me if I'm wrong, but starting next year, all 45,000 of those containers will now be built, delivered from Glendale, Arizona.
That's correct. Yes, good. In fact, we had a company that was touring the Wolf Logistics Center on October 7th, and we were meeting with the economic development team from Glendale. And as we stood out in front of where APS is building a substation there at Reams and Olive, the economic development director turned to that company and he said, "You see that building north of us, which is White Claw, which has now got their building permit. We were standing here exactly a year ago that day looking at a vacant rose farm. And 12 months later, they were completed and produced, running their production. And we actually started construction on the building prior to having a building permit and prior also than having a closing on the land, which was unheard of, but because of Glendale's persistence and tenacity, they got it done. Be congratulated.
Yeah, it's a big win for Glendale and a big win for economic development professionals all over. This is how you get stuff done.
Yes.
I'm going to thank you so much, Lance. I'm going to switch over. And John, can you talk to us a little bit about how you guys have been involved in the FTZ business at CB for probably the last 15 years now?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good, John.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I've been working with Curtis for quite some time, probably going back 15 years is when Curtis and I met, and he came to me and said, this is something that I think that we should talk with the communities in the West Valley. I think it'll help promote development of the property. Goodyear and the West Valley was just in the part of the cycle where most everything had been occurring really east of the 101 freeway. And so we went out to the EJM property, which was 220 acres out there.
Mm-hmm.
They had not yet put any infrastructure in. And to Lance's point about being able to deliver not only shovel-ready property, but on top of that, if you can offer, the foreign trade zone to both users and developers, it was just a huge catalyst. Michael Lewis at that point in time was located in the airport area in Phoenix, and they had one requirement for where they were going to relocate their business, and that was they had to be in a foreign trade zone. So that was the first deal that was done in that park. And then subsequent to that, we went to Lincoln and convinced them to go buy a 50-acre site. They built a 900,000 square foot spec building, which then was purchased by Nike. Unfortunately, Nike may or may not end up going in the building. But the point is, the reason why Lincoln was willing to go out there and risk their capital, and it was a lot of capital, 50, 60 million. One of the big drivers was the fact that it was in a magnet foreign trade zone. And they knew that that would be a big driver. It'd be a great, it would help us quite a bit from a marketing standpoint, to attract users to that location. So, and Harry's mentioned this, Curtis has mentioned it, is the foreign trade zone going to be a fit for everybody? No, but it is a great catalyst. And developers who are out looking in the market, and developers obviously are purchasing the majority. There's still a decent number of users who are buying property and developing for their own use, but developers account for a huge amount of absorption of land. And if they have an option between purchasing a piece of property not in a foreign trade zone and one that's in a foreign trade zone, they're going to opt for the foreign trade zone really every time. Opus, we're building a couple of buildings, some spec buildings with Opus right now, right near the Goodyear airport. And again, one of the reasons why they chose that location is, although it's not a magnet site, Goodyear has designated that as an area that if a user showed up that qualified, that they would support a foreign trade zone. Now, once it for some reason the property goes on the tax rolls, and then they can still qualify. Sub-Zero was a good example of that, where they had already been on the tax roll, but they still took advantage of it because of because they're a huge manufacturer. And so not only is it a benefit from a property tax standpoint, but the personal property tax savings is also significant.
Yes.
And so what's happening now is you're seeing, particularly with what's happened with COVID, and Lance mentioned this, there's an awful lot of reshoring that's occurring. Millie Mattress is a Chinese manufacturer that's just went up on the 303. They're in 600,000 feet. They're going to probably expand again, maybe take another 600,000 square feet. So what you're starting to see is, because of the disruption in logistics, you're seeing a lot more companies. And particularly, the thing that's interesting right now is we track over 160 companies currently looking in the Phoenix metro area. And of those 106, over 20,000 square feet, of those, 70% are manufacturers. That historically is very unusual, okay, for the Phoenix area. You know, we've always been kind of known as a warehouse market and something that serves the West and Southern California. But we've seen a huge demand. And the manufacturers, again, because of the personal property, because of the machinery, because of the cost of all that, the ability to locate in a foreign trade zone, and I know Sub-Zero's saved, I'm sure, millions, given the cost of the manufacturing equipment that they have, you know, in that building.
Yeah, their real estate was about 15 million, and their total investment in CapEx was almost 80 million. So
well, Nike only fitted out a small portion of the building, and they've already spent 30 million. Okay, so they probably at the end of the day could have spent 70, 80, 90 million, you know, in improvements. So what we see is, and it's not uncommon now for certain users when they come to the market, when you ask them, you know, size and where they want to be and so forth and so on, a lot of times they'll tell us, unless it's in a foreign trade zone, I don't want to take a look at it. Or unless the community is willing to support a foreign trade zone, then don't show me the site. So it's become more and more important.
And more known. And that's part of what we're doing here. And, you know, we again thank Westmark for having this session, because the more awareness that the general population has about the FTZ capability that we have all over the West Valley, the better it's going to be, because we definitely want to make sure that we can compete with like a Utah and a Nevada that in some cases actually give free land away. And
right.
With that, I'm going to transition it over to Tony Lydon of JLL, who's got stories about the early goings and just some of the ones just recently where that's been the case. Tony, you on?
I'm on, Curtis. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you. We don't see you, but we got your voice.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Westmark, for allowing me to participate today. So, our team was fortunate enough to support both Dix and Sub-Zero when they landed in the West Valley back in 2014. Two interesting items to note. One was the Dix story. You know, we worked with that their team out of Pittsburgh. You know, when we first broached the topic of foreign trade zone, they said, "Oh, we're familiar with foreign trade zones. We know all about them, and we're just not sure that this would be appropriate, you know, this particular project." What they didn't realize, and we said, "Well, look, we understand your experience to date with foreign trade zones, a little bit different in the state of Arizona. So, if you wouldn't mind, give us 20 minutes with our FTZ consultant on the phone, Curtis." And, 10, 15 minutes, you'll know whether or not this is something that might work for you. Well, long story short, 15 minutes in, 10 minutes into the call, they said, this is better than sliced bread. We're in. What do we need to do? They're a 720,000 square foot fulfillment center. And, they've benefited greatly from the entitlement that we worked through and with Curtis on securing that FTZ certification. And to Harry Paxson's point, the lift is about 10x when you go from vacant agricultural land and its assessed level to a foreign trade zone, $200 million, 150. As it pertains to Sub-Zero, and John touched on this a little bit, Initially, we came out to the West Valley. The original building was only 440,000 feet. They've since expanded it to 770. And to John's point, the initial building was already assessed, so we were unable to secure that entitlement on the initial building. However, Curtis touched on this. Phase one was a $60 million CapEx spend inside the box for their FFE, IT, material handling equipment, and other equipment. And so that entitlement can definitely be used for the capital expenditure inside of these facilities. And I think I've heard a couple of people state, I mean, with today's manufacturers and non-manufacturers, these are companies spending incredible amounts of money inside the box. REI, for instance, who's located along the Loop 303 corridor, has spent over $200 a square foot inside of their box, inside of their warehouse. Again, on state-of-the-art equipment manufacturing or processing equipment, rather. I mean, for instance, they have 12 single-touch omni-channel sortation machines. They're incredibly expensive. Or Nike, John touched on Nike. That was a $200 million budget to spend inside the box. They've spent about 55, 60 million of it so far. So again, these are robust, capital expenditures inside these facilities, and the, West Valley FTZ is just a really terrific. It's one of our very few silver bullets, if you will, in the economic development solution to offer these major employers. So we're big fans of it. We work with Curtis and Lance and John and others weekly to help facilitate these types of transactions.
Thanks, Tony. That's really good. Just a real quick follow-up. One of the things that we have talked about is manufacturing and the growth in manufacturing. But the other thing that we've seen shooting up is the growth in e-commerce. And e-commerce is literally a shift of a retail real estate to industrial real estate. And if you look at it as that shift and you wonder, wow, this mall is going out of business, well, all the square footage is going to the warehouses and the fulfillment centers, which, by the way, not only pay extra taxes to the cities in the state here in Arizona because of the sales tax, but also their workers are usually at a higher level because they're much more sophisticated in a fulfillment center than you are in a distribution center. So you get a lot more high wage paying jobs that are higher than the 125% of the prevailing, and they are usually really, really good quality jobs. One of our customers that we were talking about that Harry mentioned is almost double that, and the e-commerce is a big factor in what they're doing out there. So Mike, I guess we're open for questions, and Diane, did you want to say anything at the end here?
I was just saying to Harry, go back 30 years and we wouldn't be sitting here doing this today. Because at that point, there was a huge fight going on about all of the people who wanted to have houses literally next door to Luke Air Force Base. And that a whole contingent of us went to Washington to make sure that Luke would be cocooned, for lack of a better word. Right. And now look at what is going on. And of course, the planes are flying from Luke, and it doesn't matter to the manufacturing, right? So, I mean, it's really an interesting, total change from 30 years ago to now.
Yeah. Diane, this is Mike Hoover. I really appreciate you talking about some of the history of really how we've been able to build into the success over the last several decades. And I really appreciate the technical discussion here, the professionals who represent property and bring investment. But if it's okay, I'd like to do a couple quick questions for this group. And we're going to go kind of rapid style because it is a hard stop at 2 o'clock. But I guess I would start with this. So Curtis, as a layman sitting here watching this, wanting to learn a little bit more about foreign trade zones, I guess the quick question is is there a general rule of thumb for a warehouse project in size, a manufacturing project in size, where they should be calling into the GMFTZ board to get some advice on potential qualifications? Is there a general rule of thumb on size of projects they should be considering?
That is the $64,000 question, and it's a great one. Thanks for asking it, Mike. From a manufacturing perspective, even small manufacturers that have gross sales of $20 million total, if you're importing anything of size in terms of like $1 million in imports, $1 million of imported components, and your gross sales are $20 million, I guarantee you there's some savings in there. That smaller company has some savings. You know, you talk about Sub-Zero and White Claw and Roush. I mean, they've got multi-billion dollars worth of sales. So when they bring in ingredients from all over the world, they're going to have significant FTZ savings. I think the slide said that the combined savings of those 4 companies up there already is close to $16 million a year in tariff relief and local incentives based on the reclass. So it's a significant number. Warehousing is a little bit different. So my rule of thumb, it's easy for EDCs, easy for real estate guys to understand. 300,000 square feet of a retail type component. That's electronics or apparel or footwear or food products that are in. Anything that's 300,000 square feet or more probably qualifies.
Great, that's wonderful. So this is both for Curtis, for you, and for Harry. I think about the genesis of this particular foreign trade zone in the West Valley. So real quick, Curtis, and then Harry. So Curtis, you do work all over the United States. How unique is the collaboration that we see here in the West Valley? And then the follow-up for Harry is, what was it like in those early days trying to form that public-private partnership to launch a federal program here for the West Valley? So Curtis, I'll start with you.
I only know of 2 in the whole country that are this regional approach. One is in Central Valley, California, that spreads all the way from Modesto down to Fresno. That's a foreign trade zone we set up probably 20 years ago. And this one here. The difference is in Modesto and that foreign trade zone, they've got 5 operators. In less than 10 years, we have got 15 companies utilizing this foreign trade zone, or like Harry said, in the process. And Harry, I do want to go back to that thing John mentioned. It was John who brought me to your office in 2008.
Harry, I think you might be on mute.
Actually, Curtis, I remember that day. It was actually the fall, like September of 2007. I had just started here. Wow. And that's a good place to start on your question, Mike, because initially it was a big lift here in my city, as it was in a lot of cities, to understand the foreign trade zone, to be able to communicate what the potential benefits could be. The first question we always faced was, wait a minute, you're giving up these potential property taxes? And we're saying, you know, in my community, it was, yeah, I had thousands of acres of available land that was already zoned, but the vast majority of it, going back to Lance's point, the vast majority of it wasn't anywhere near shovel ready. Maybe some was semi shovel ready. So what do? You know, so certainly we need to attract investment. And a lot of the communities, I think, saw that as well. So they could see the benefit, but it was a lot of organizations that had to come together. We needed to get support not only from our cities, but also from our school districts. We need to get support not just the school districts, but also from Westmark and other regional organizations, in order to show that, hey, we could establish a foreign trade zone, and then there needed to be an independent one here in the West Valley to cover all the West Valley communities.
Right.
And so doing that was a lift, and it became another lift as we got to the federal level. It certainly did. But what was great about it is it also bonded, I think, communities together, as has been done many times in the West Valley. Diane certainly can speak to some of those things. Centra probably, I'm sure, could as well. So it helped bond us together, and communities begin to see the value and the potential. And now we're beginning to roll forward, and the benefits that I think our communities are seeing, our school districts are seeing. And so it was a lot of work. This certainly was a lot of work, but fortunately, through the vision that community leaders had, through the guidance and direction that Curtis had, and how he had seen it working elsewhere, I think it became the best blend it could be for the West Valley, all the communities that exist here in the West Side.
Great.
And Mike, the biggest add-on to that, is something Harry mentioned earlier. When you had this momentum going of companies saying, yeah, we want inside the foreign trade zone, it created infrastructure that Harry and his guys were saying, how are we going to get all this water, sewer, electricity, natural gas, T1 lines up all the way up to 303 that wasn't even built then. Right. And so the FTZ was a catalyst. And to that end, I want to say just real quick, we want to honor Michael Martindale for putting together the water and sewer process that created the whole expansion along Northern Parkway. And Lance was instrumental in that. But if it wasn't for Michael Martindale, that whole area north of Luke that Diane mentioned would still be farmland.
Exactly. Yeah.
Amen.
Hey, thanks, Curtis. Thanks, Harry. Guys, we're going to go real quick. I'm going to do some rapid fire after this one little soliloquy. I'm very fortunate to work on the board of the GMFTZ, represent a community, the West Valley, and Surprise. And one of the questions I get, sometimes from our residents, sometimes from other interested parties, is what do you think about all the success that's happening down in Goodyear and it's not happening in Surprise? And it's very simple. Our residents that are working in Goodyear at all those amazing facilities are commuting 10 minutes. They're not commuting an hour.
Amen.
And I think that's the secret sauce here in the West Valley is we recognize the collaboration, the mutual benefit, and really working together. And I want to say, we have a great board who have a lot of responsibilities outside of the GMFTZ, but we have at least 2 or 3 of our other board members that are not part of the panel, but are tuning in today to show their support. So I want to say thanks to Bruce Hilby, thanks to Rick Buss, and if I missed anybody, I really just want to thank everybody that's supporting this. But I am going to finish with 3 of our real estate professionals, and it's a 1 or 2 word answer. So the GMFTZ just celebrated its 10-year anniversary, wonderful success. How would you describe in 1 to 3 words the opportunity that you see for the GMFTZ in the next 10 years? Lance, I'll start with you, sir.
Excellent.
Wonderful. Tony Lydon.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Oh, I love it. He's an extra word. I love it. And then John, we'll finish with you. You've been a wonderful supporter of the zone for so long. How would you describe the next 10 years?
Very good if the communities support it.
That's a great thing to finish on. Community support is the key to all of this. Centra, I'll turn it over to you. Diane, thank you for your leadership on the board. And Centra, I'll go ahead and close with you.
Awesome, thank you. So thank you all, GMFTZ board, Harry, Diane, Curtis, Lance, John, Tony, thank you all for being here. This was, I just have to point out some of the attentiveness ratings that I was watching as the webinar was going on. 90% attentiveness down to 73%. 73% is pretty darn remarkable. So to get all the way up and to hold that 90% was pretty incredible. Not to mention the text messages that I was getting about what an amazing program and information that was provided. And so we're really excited to be able to continue our partnership with the GMFTZ. We were alongside one another many years ago when the Foreign Trade Zone was created in the West Valley. And so I'm very excited to continue that partnership with the GMFTZ today and into the future. There's so much exciting news going on in the West Valley. We had also several attendees in workforce that joined us today, because again, that is a key priority of what Westmark does and what you all provide in terms of the jobs that are created. So thank you all, and we look forward to bringing you a new exciting topic next month. So stay tuned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.